the art of helping wisely, setting boundaries, without losing your compassion. Let me tell you something powerful about kindness. It's the foundation of our humanity. That moment when you reach out your hand to someone who's fallen, when you offer support to someone who's struggling, that's when you're at your most human, your most connected. But here's the truth that not enough people talk about. Kindness without boundaries isn't kindness at all. It's self-sacrifice, and eventually it becomes self-destruction. I want to talk to you today about something that might sound contradictory at first. I want to talk about being selective with your compassion, about helping others without destroying yourself in the process. Does that sound selfish to you? It's not. It's necessary. Because let's be honest, we've all encountered people who drain us. People who seem to need more and more but never get better. People who leave us feeling exhausted rather than fulfilled after we help them. And that's what we're going to explore today. The 8 types of people you need to be cautious about helping, not because you shouldn't help at all, but because you need to help wisely. 1. The responsibility. Dodgers first on our list, the responsibility dodgers. You know them, don't you? These are the people who always have a problem but never a solution, always have a crisis but never a plan. They're drowning in a sea of their own making, but they expect you to be their lifeboat, their rescue helicopter, their entire Coast Guard. It's not my fault, they say, over and over again. Nothing is ever their fault. The world is against them. The system is rigged. Everyone else is the problem. And you, with your big heart and your eagerness to help, you jump in. You offer advice. You give support. You extend your hand. But here's what happens next. They take that hand and pull you right into the water with them. Why? Because responsibility dodgers don't want solutions. Solutions require change, and change requires responsibility. What they want is someone to blame when the solutions don't work, someone to cushion their fall when they refuse to stand up. And the more you help, the more dependent they become. The more you rescue, the less they learn to swim on their own. You spend hours helping them apply for jobs they never show up to, days helping them organize their lives only to find them in the same chaos a week later, months trying to help them get back on their feet only to realize they've grown comfortable leaning on yours. So how do you recognize when it's time to stop? Look for patterns, not incidents. Everyone faces hardships. Everyone needs help sometimes. But when the same problems keep recycling with no effort on their part to change the outcome, that's your signal. That's when you need to say, I believe in you enough to know you can handle this. That's when you need to step back and let them face the natural consequences of their choices. It's not abandonment, it's respect. Respect for their capacity to grow, to learn, to take charge of their own life. And it's respect for yourself, for your time, for your energy that deserves to be invested where it can truly make a difference. 2. The gratitude vampire. Next, let's talk about the gratitude vampires. These people take and take and take your time, your energy, your resources, but acknowledgement, appreciation, gratitude, that's as rare as rain in a desert. You help them move houses and they don't even offer you a glass of water. You stay up all night helping them with a project, and they don't even say thank you. You go out of your way to connect them with an opportunity, and they act like it was their right all along. And it's subtle, isn't it? They don't openly dismiss your help. They just don't notice it, don't value it, don't reciprocate it. At first, you tell yourself it doesn't matter. You're not helping for the recognition. You're helping because it's the right thing to do. But over time, something starts to shift. You feel drained after being around them. Helping them doesn't fill your cup like helping others does. Instead, it leaves you feeling empty, used. Why? Because gratitude isn't just a polite formality. It's the energy exchange that makes helping sustainable. It's what transforms a transaction into a connection. Without it, helping becomes depleting rather than fulfilling. And here's the real danger. Gratitude. Vampires don't just drain your energy. They drain your belief in humanity. They make you cynical. They make you doubt the value of helping altogether. So how do you know when to set boundaries? Pay attention to how you feel after helping them. Do you feel appreciated, even if they didn't explicitly say thank you? Or do you feel like you've given a piece of yourself away with nothing in return? And when you recognize this pattern, what do? You don't need to make a grand announcement. You don't need to cut them off completely. You simply need to adjust your expectations and your investment. Help within your means. Give what you can freely give without expectation of return. And save your most generous efforts for those who know how to receive with grace, with appreciation, with the understanding that your help is a gift, not an obligation. 3. The emotional blackmailers. Now, let's talk about the emotional blackmailers. These people have mastered the art of making you feel guilty for not helping them. They wield your compassion like a weapon against you. They know exactly what to say, exactly which buttons to push to make you feel like you're a terrible person if you don't drop everything to help them. "I guess I just don't matter to you," they say. Or, "No one ever helps me when I need it." Or, "I would do it for you." And suddenly you find yourself saying yes when you want to say no, giving when you have nothing left to give, sacrificing your own needs because they've convinced you that putting yourself first is selfish. But here's what they don't tell you. Emotional health isn't a zero-sum game. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary. It's what allows you to help sustainably rather than burning yourself out in a blaze of resentment. Emotional blackmailers don't just ask for help, they demand it. They don't just need support. They need you to prove your loyalty, your love, your worth as a friend or family member by sacrificing yourself on the altar of their needs. And the cost? Your peace of mind, your self-respect, your ability to distinguish between genuine needs and manipulative demands. So how do you recognize when you're being emotionally blackmailed? Look for the guilt. If saying no triggers an avalanche of shame, if setting a boundary is met with accusations rather than understanding, if helping them feels more like a hostage situation than a choice, those are your red flags. And what do you do then? You practice the art of compassionate refusal. "I care about you, but I can't help with this right now. I understand you're going through a difficult time, and I wish I could do more, but I need to take care of my own well-being too." Remember, genuine love doesn't demand self-destruction as proof of its existence. True connection thrives on mutual respect, not emotional hostage-taking. The emotional blackmailers in your life may not change their tactics overnight, but by refusing to play by their rules, you teach them and yourself what healthy helping actually looks like. The crisis manufacturers. Fourth on our list, the crisis manufacturers. Life is full of legitimate emergencies, real problems that need immediate attention. But for some people, every situation is DEFCON 1. Every problem is the end of the world. Every minor setback is a catastrophic crisis that requires all hands on deck, specifically your hands. You know the type, don't you? The friend whose text messages are always urgent. The family member who turns a flat tire into a life-altering tragedy. The colleague who treats every deadline like it's a matter of national security. And because you're a good person, because you care, you respond. You drop what you're doing. You rush to the rescue. You put out the fire. But here's the thing about crisis manufacturers. There's always another fire, always another emergency, always another reason why they need your help right now. Why? Because crisis gets attention. Crisis gets resources. Crisis gets people to drop their boundaries and come running. And the more you respond to these manufactured emergencies, the more you teach them that this is an effective way to get your time, your energy, your attention. You become their personal first responder, on call 24/7 for situations that, frankly, they could handle themselves with a little planning and perspective. The cost to you isn't just time and energy, though those are significant. The real cost is your ability to distinguish between actual emergencies and manufactured ones. It's the background anxiety of always being on alert, always waiting for the next crisis call. It's the gradual erosion of your right to prioritize your own needs. So how do you know when you're dealing with a genuine emergency versus a manufactured one? Context and patterns are your guides. Does this person have a history of crying wolf? Is the urgency proportional to the situation? Does the emergency conveniently arise when you've just set a boundary or when you're focused on something else? And how do you respond? First, take a breath. Remember that not every crisis requires immediate action. "Let me think about how I can help and get back to you" is a powerful phrase. So what steps have you taken to address this yourself? For the chronic crisis manufacturer, the most compassionate thing you can do for both of you is to refuse to participate in the drama, to respond calmly, proportionally, and with appropriate boundaries, to help them develop their own crisis management skills rather than always being their emergency backup system. Because the truth is, constantly responding to manufactured emergencies doesn't help them grow. It doesn't teach resilience or problem solving. It just reinforces the belief that escalation works better than measured response. Real compassion sometimes means letting people face manageable challenges so they can develop the skills to handle the genuinely difficult ones on their own. 5. The validation addicts. Now, let's talk about the validation addicts. These are people who don't just want your help, they want your constant affirmation. They need you to consistently validate their feelings, their choices, their entire existence. And on the surface, that doesn't seem so bad, does it? We all need encouragement sometimes. We all need someone to tell us we're on the right track. But validation addicts take this natural human need and amplify it to an exhausting degree. They text you 20 times a day asking if you think they made the right decision. They need you to continually reassure them that they're good, worthy, justified in their actions. It's not just occasional reassurance. It's a constant need for emotional feeding that never seems satisfied, like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. And here's what happens when you try to be that source of constant validation. You become emotionally depleted. You start to feel responsible for their self-esteem, their confidence, their emotional stability. You become their emotional life support system. The cost to you is enormous. Your own emotional needs get pushed aside. Your energy gets drained attending to their constant need for reassurance. Worst of all, you start to lose the authentic connection that made you want to help in the first place. Because real relationships can't thrive when one person's entire role is to validate the other. So how do you recognize when someone has crossed from normal need for support into validation addiction? Pay attention to the frequency and intensity of their needs. Do they take in your encouragement and grow from it, or do they immediately need another dose? Can they ever be satisfied with your level of support, or is it never enough? Do they show any interest in your emotional needs, or is the relationship entirely one-directional? And how do you set boundaries with a validation addict? Gradually and compassionately. I hear that you're feeling insecure, and that's okay. But I've already shared my thoughts on this, and I think at this point, the reassurance needs to come from within you. Help them develop their own internal validation system. Encourage them to notice when they're seeking external reassurance and ask themselves what they actually believe. Celebrate their moments of self-trust and independent decision-making. Remember, your job as a friend, a family member, a colleague is not to be someone's constant validation machine. It's to support them in developing their own emotional resilience. Sometimes the most helpful thing you can do is to step back and let them learn to trust themselves. 6. The expectation escalators. 6th on our list, the expectation escalators. These people might start with small, reasonable requests for help, but before you know it, they've moved the goalposts. What began as, "Could you give me a ride to the airport?" becomes, "Could you drive me to the airport, help me check my bags, wait with me until boarding, and then pick me up when I return?" It's like the old story of giving someone an inch and them taking a mile. Except they take that mile so gradually you barely notice until you're exhausted from the journey. The insidious thing about expectation escalators is that each individual request seems reasonable in isolation. Just a small favor, just a little help, just this one thing. But collectively, these requests create a pattern of ever-increasing expectations that can completely overtake your boundaries. And here's what makes it especially difficult. They often combine these escalating expectations with genuine appreciation. "You're so good at this. No one helps me like you do. I don't know what I'd do without you." That appreciation feels good, doesn't it? It validates your desire to be helpful, to be needed. But over time, it traps you in a role you never agreed to. It transforms you from an autonomous individual with your own needs into an extension of their support system. The cost, your time, your energy, your right to choose how and when you help. Gradually, you find yourself doing more and more for this person with less and less choice in the matter because the expectation has been set that this is your role. So how do you recognize when expectations are escalating beyond reasonable bounds? Pay attention to how requests evolve over time. Notice whether small favors are turning into major commitments. Ask yourself, did I actually agree to this level of involvement? Or did I get here through a series of incremental steps? And how do you reset those expectations? Clear, direct communication is key. I'm happy to help with X, but I won't be able to do Y and Z. I noticed that what started as occasional help has become a regular commitment. I need to readjust what I'm able to offer. The expectation escalators in your life may push back. They may try to make you feel like you're changing the rules mid-game. But remember, you have the right to define and enforce your own boundaries at any point. You have the right to say, this is as far as I'm willing to go. Helping others should be a choice you make freely, not an obligation that grows beyond your capacity to fulfill it. 7. The soul sappers. Let's talk now about the soul sappers. These people don't just take your time or your energy, they take your joy, your enthusiasm, your belief in possibility, your fundamental sense of hope. You know the feeling. You're excited about something, a new project, a goal, an achievement, and you share it with them. But instead of sharing your excitement, they respond with doubt, with criticism, with all the reasons why it won't work, why it's not as good as you think, why you shouldn't get your hopes up. Or maybe you're going through a tough time, and instead of lifting you up, they pull you further down. They don't just acknowledge your pain, they amplify it. They don't offer perspective. They remove all possibility of it. Being around soul sappers is like trying to light a match in a rainstorm. No matter how much inner fire you bring, they somehow manage to dampen it. And the insidious thing is, often they present this as being realistic, as telling it like it is, as just being honest. So you start to doubt your own perception. Maybe they're right. Maybe you are being naive, overly optimistic, unrealistic. The cost of helping soul sappers is spiritual depletion. You give and give, trying to lift them up, trying to help them see possibility, and in return, they drain your optimism, your resilience, your belief that things can change for the better. Over time, you start to adopt their negative worldview. You start to see problems instead of opportunities, obstacles instead of challenges to overcome. And that's when you know they've taken something precious from you, your capacity for hope. So how do you recognize when someone is sapping your soul? Pay attention to how you feel after interactions with them. Are you energized or depleted? Do you feel more or less capable of facing challenges? Has your perspective shifted toward possibility or limitation? And how do you protect yourself? First, recognize that negativity can be contagious, but so can resilience. Limit your exposure to soul sappers when you're feeling vulnerable. Balance interactions with them with time spent with people who energize and inspire you. Most importantly, strengthen your own sense of reality. Just because someone presents their negative perspective as the truth doesn't mean it is. There are many ways to see the world, many lenses through which to interpret events. Choose the ones that serve your growth. This doesn't mean you abandon soul sappers entirely. Sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is to be the one who consistently brings perspective, possibility, and hope into their lives. As long as you're strong enough not to be pulled under by their undertow of negativity. But remember, you cannot pour from an empty cup. If helping them is consistently draining your own capacity for joy and hope, it's time to create some distance and replenish your spiritual reserves. 8. The boundary testers. Finally, let's talk about the boundary testers. These are the people who view your boundaries not as lines to be respected, but as obstacles to be overcome, as challenges to be conquered, as starting points for negotiation. You tell them you can't talk after 9 p.m., and suddenly they have an emergency at 9:05. You say you can help with research but not write their entire paper, and they ask you to just look over a draft that turns out to be a blank document. You explain that you can't lend money anymore, and they come to you with a story so compelling, so urgent, that it's designed to make you break your own rule. Boundary testers are persistent, creative, sometimes even manipulative. They see your no as the beginning of a conversation, not the end of one. And because you're compassionate, because you want to help, you make exceptions. You bend your rules. You think, just this once won't hurt. But with boundary testers, there is no just once. Each exception becomes evidence that your boundaries are flexible, negotiable, optional. Each time you give in, you teach them that persistence pays off. That if they just push hard enough, long enough, creatively enough, you'll eventually cave. The cost to you isn't just the specific boundary that gets violated, it's your sense of agency over your own life. Your ability to trust yourself to hold the lines you've drawn, the fundamental belief that your needs matter just as much as everyone else's. So how do you recognize when someone is testing your boundaries rather than simply asking for help? Look for patterns of escalation after you've said no. Notice whether emergencies coincidentally arise right after you've set a limit. Pay attention to whether they accept your boundaries with grace or treat them as obstacles to overcome. And how do you respond? Consistency is key. A boundary that gets enforced sometimes but not others isn't really a boundary at all. It's a suggestion. When you say no, mean it. When you set a limit, hold it. This doesn't mean you can never make a genuine exception for extraordinary circumstances. But be honest with yourself about whether this is truly an exception or part of a pattern of boundary testing. And when you do hold firm, expect pushback. Expect guilt trips, emotional appeals, even anger. Boundary testers aren't used to hearing no that sticks. But remember, everyone benefits from clear, consistent boundaries. They create trust, predictability, mutual respect. By holding your boundaries firmly but compassionately, you're not just protecting yourself, you're modeling healthy relationship dynamics that ultimately benefit everyone involved. The art of helping wisely. So where does this leave us? Are we saying you should stop helping others? That you should build walls instead of bridges? That compassion is too costly to be worth the price? Not at all. What we're saying is that helping, true helping, requires wisdom, discernment, an understanding of when your assistance uplifts both the giver and receiver, and when it diminishes both. Because here's the truth. When you help in ways that drain you completely, that violate your boundaries, that ignore your own needs, you're not really helping at all. You're enabling, codepending, sacrificing, but not truly helping. Real help, the kind that changes lives, that builds connections, that makes the world better, comes from a place of fullness, not depletion. It comes from respect, not obligation. It comes from boundaries that are clear enough to protect you, but flexible enough to let love flow through. So how do we help wisely? We start by recognizing our own capacity. by understanding that we have limits of time, of energy, of emotional bandwidth, and that exceeding those limits helps no one. We learn to distinguish between helping and rescuing, between supporting and enabling, between compassion and codependence. We practice the art of compassionate refusal, of saying no with love when saying yes would harm us or them or both. We set clear, consistent boundaries that create safety for everyone involved. And perhaps most importantly, we recognize that the most valuable help we can offer isn't always doing something for someone else. Sometimes it's believing in their capacity to do it themselves. Sometimes it's holding space for their struggle without trying to fix it. Sometimes it's simply bearing witness to their journey with love and without judgment. When we help wisely, everyone benefits. The receiver gets what they truly need, not just what they want. The giver remains whole, energized, capable of sustainable compassion rather than sporadic sacrifice. So go out there and help. Be generous with your time, your resources, your love. The world needs your compassion now more than ever. But help wisely. Help in ways that honor both the other person's needs and your own boundaries. Help in ways that lift everyone involved higher rather than pulling anyone down. Because when you master the art of helping wisely, you don't just change others' lives, you transform your own. Did you know? Just one like from you can give me the motivation to create more awesome videos. And by subscribing with the notification bell on, you'll never miss out on my next amazing content. Don't forget to leave a comment below. Let me know what you think about this video or suggest a topic you'd like to see next.